Hello, this is Adam Bernard from AutoPerspectives, and to those who celebrate, happy St. Patrick's Day. It's March 17th, time to look back at some of the more interesting stories that we saw in the auto industry over the past week. Mercedes has finally unveiled their new entry-level model, the CLA. It's the first entry off the new Mercedes Multi-Energy Architecture, or MMA, which we saw previewed as the CLA concept a few years back. It should be noted that there is both a hybrid variant and an EV. The EV is not the EQA as we first expected, but it's simply the CLA with EQ technology, which is not any less clumsy than it sounds. But it does indicate, again, the expected discontinuation of EQ as a brand and just kind of relegated to a little technology sub-brand. You'll note the CLA does not look entirely dissimilar from its predecessor. It is a four-door coupe with frameless doors. It is a little longer and a little roomier, with a drag coefficient claimed to be as low as 0.21, which is pretty impressive for a vehicle this size. It's a lot harder to make smaller vehicles aerodynamic than it is to make bigger vehicles aerodynamic. If you are a fan of the Mercedes logo, the three-pointed star, you are in luck, because if you zoom in close here on the grille, you'll note that the grille includes 142 individually animated three-pointed stars. And then right behind that is Mercedes' first frunk. All the Mercedes EVs that we've seen up to date, up to this moment, do not have a frunk. Mercedes has basically reworked the climate control system to make it smaller and easier to package, to open up some more functional space at the front of the vehicle. Powering all of this underneath is MB.OS. That is the new internally developed Mercedes operating system. It is a purpose-built chip-to-cloud architecture to provide more flexibility for future updates. We all know the value of future-proofing, and we've all seen vehicles whose infotainment systems have aged horribly, so Mercedes is hoping to avoid that with MB.OS. Now, the CLA with EQ technology has an 800-volt architecture. Normally, you see that kind of at the higher end of the market. So now it's trickling down to more affordable vehicles. That enables charging fast charging at the rate of 320 kilowatts through a built-in NACS charge port. So if you pull up to a Tesla supercharger, you no longer need an adapter. You will need an adapter if you pull up to a CCS port. That will enable the CLA to retrieve about 160 miles of EPA range in 10 minutes, which is very, very impressive. And with the larger 85 kilowatt hour battery, if you take the WLTP numbers, it looks like they may get well over 400 miles, perhaps as high as 420 miles on the EPA cycle when the vehicle launches here later this year. Now, the EV is either rear drive or all-wheel drive, so one or two motors, and it has a two-speed gearbox, just like the Porsche Taycan. A little more complicated, a little costlier. Mercedes said they did that for reasons of performance and efficiency. And the higher-end CLA offers 349 horsepower and 0 to 60 in about 4.8 seconds. The upgraded battery technology boasts an energy density which is about 20% higher than the current Mercedes EVs on the road now. And of course, higher energy density translates to a smaller battery and a lighter battery as well. One fun, unfortunate fact for the Mercedes, the CLA 350 4MATIC EQ, which is the flagship here at the moment, actually weighs slightly more than the entry-level full-size S-Class internal combustion sedan. So while Mercedes has made a lot of progress with the CLA mass reduction, didn't really, unfortunately, figure that high here. Now, I said the CLA 350 was the flagship. We are expecting a 500 horsepower AMG variant to follow probably next year at some point, and that will feature axial flux motors. This is from a company called Yasa that Mercedes acquired, and these are more compact and higher performance, better suited for a performance-oriented EV. The CLA AMG will also get drift mode and a hydraulic rear wing. Now, I mentioned up front that there is also a hybrid version of the CLA, not called EQ. That hybrid is front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So literally, this platform can do internal combustion front drive, all-wheel drive with internal combustion or electric power, or electric rear drive. The hybrid is a 1.5 liter setup. It's a mild hybrid with a 1.3 kilowatt hour battery and a 27 horsepower motor capable of limited zero emissions travel, which is a little unusual for a mild hybrid. And Mercedes talked about 3 levels of power available for the hybrid, but we don't have all the specs of that yet. Inside the CLA is the Super Screen. The Super Screen is to the CLA, but the Hyper Screen is to the bigger Mercedes products. And this is something that carries over from the CLA concept. It is, as you can see, from pillar to pillar. The passenger side display allows music control, gaming, or watching movies, and there's a little camera to make sure the driver is not watching the movies because that's not safe. And then Mercedes will shut that down if they notice that's happening. In the middle, you see the floating center console with 2 cup holders up top, some storage space below. There's wireless charging and ambient lighting, and then throughout the interior, there are actually 4 100-watt USB-C ports that are powerful enough to charge a laptop, so you can bring your toys with you. Behind the super screen is MBUX, the Mercedes-Benz user experience. It now has Chat GPT to answer questions. It has Microsoft Bing for searches, and it has Google Gemini for navigation-related queries. So if you're a fan of any particular AI, they're kind of all involved here at this point. The maps are sourced from Google, but it is a Mercedes interface design, and there's both wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. The CLA also boasts the ability to reserve a charging slot at MB Charge location up to 15 minutes before arriving. So if you're worried about showing up and not having a place to plug in, there is a slight way to kind of ameliorate that. Overall, this looks to be an extremely competitive product, especially as an entry-level vehicle for Mercedes. Mercedes has previously stated they're going to kind of slim down their entry luxury portfolio and push the whole portfolio up market to generate higher revenues and better margins, but they still see an opportunity for younger, less affluent buyers to get into the Mercedes brand. So the CLA seems to check all the boxes. We will see a CLA shooting brake, not in the US, unfortunately, because we don't like wagons anymore, and then eventually a couple of SUVs off this platform as well, but definitely off to a good start and a clear competitor to the Tesla Model 3. Toyota's C-HR Plus is not just a better C-HR, it is actually a different vehicle entirely. We'll get to the name in a moment. Several years ago, Toyota's head here in North America said they wanted to be the Macy's of powertrains, offering as much choice as possible, like when you go to a department store. And to many, that meant an approach to EVs that was largely compliance driven. And the first couple of EVs that came out, including the BZ4X, were not really that impressive. And there have been some updates to the BZ4X and to the Lexus RZ. That's a separate topic. But now Toyota has added a brand new entry based on the BZ Compact concept that was shown in Los Angeles in late 2022. And I mentioned the name. So up to now, the plan had been Toyota's trademarked a whole bunch of BZ names. BZ stands for Beyond Zero. And the idea is that the bigger the number, like BZ4, BZ5, BZ6, the bigger and more expensive the vehicle. And then X would indicate it was an SUV, and X indicates it's probably a sedan of some sort. Just like Mercedes is ditching EQ, Toyota appears to be shuffling BZ out the door. And so they are now preferring to rely on existing and heritage-related Toyota nameplates for their EVs. So Toyota already has a C-HR. This is the C-HR Plus, which is a C-HR that's more, even though it's literally on a different platform with different sheet metal. This will be sold alongside the internal combustion C-HR, which is now only built in Turkey. It is not sold in the U.S. It was dropped from the U.S. market about 2.5 years ago, but it is sold in other markets. This vehicle is kind of an SUV coupe, so maybe a little less functional, but more stylish. It slots below the BZ4X, but it does share its platform. But it also updated the powertrain and some of the componentry along the way to create definitely a more competitive SUV for Toyota. There are 2 battery sizes and 3 power levels. This comes as either front drive or all-wheel drive with up to 77 kilowatt-hour battery, up to 338 horsepower, which makes it pretty potent for a Toyota EV. 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, and an EPA equivalent range of about 320 miles. And yes, like the CLA, this vehicle is expected to come to the U.S. market at some point, although not officially confirmed by Toyota. There is a new battery preconditioning system and a new heat pump with a 150 kilowatt fast charge rate, which is not bad. It's a 400 volt electric architecture, so some automakers can get as high as 200 kilowatts, so 150 for an entry-level SUV is acceptable. And you can also get a 22 kilowatt home charger, which is pretty impressive. That you normally see at the higher end of the market as well. They claim better than expected interior space for the compact SUV because it is a dedicated EV skateboard. Inside, there are twin wireless chargers, rear USB ports, rear AC controls, and a panoramic glass roof. Standard equipment includes a blind spot monitor, adaptive headlamps, and there's an available panoramic view monitor and park assist. And you can see a pretty conventional interior layout here with a nice big 14-inch touchscreen right in the center of the dash. Toyota notes their battery care program is a 10-year setup or 1 million kilometers or about 620,000 miles. It guarantees that the battery will retain 70% of its capacity after 10 years. But to do that, you have to make sure every year, it's like getting your body checked out, you have to get your battery checked out by a Toyota dealer so they can do an annual health check. The C-HR Plus will launch in Europe at the end of this year. Again, North American sales are likely next year, and we will probably see it in some other markets as well. Toyota decided to do a little commuting in their recent European EV press conference, and they presented the FT-ME as a new micro-mobility concept. This is similar in concept to the recently launched Mobilized Duo. That is the vehicle that replaces the Renault Twizy in the Renault group. It's also comparable to the Citroën Ami and its siblings from Fiat and Opel. These are what we might call quadricycles in Europe. Depending on the power output, somebody who's as young as 14 years old can actually get a license to drive one of these around the city. Size-wise, the FT-ME is around the same size as the original Smart 4.2 that came out in the late 90s. And Toyota says the styling here was inspired by a jet helmet. Overall, Toyota is targeting a 90% reduction in the carbon footprint compared to today's city vehicles and 1/3 the energy consumption of a typical EV today. Up top is a solar roof that adds roughly 10 to 15 miles per day, but actually didn't offer any details yet on range, performance, or charging times. Again, this is still a concept. Toyota has built something like this in the Japanese market quite a while ago, so I would not be surprised to see a vehicle like this in production. You'll note in the bottom right photo, those are some folding wheelchair there on the passenger side of the vehicle. This vehicle can be driven solely by hand commands, and then there's storage for a wheelchair. So Toyota has participated in the Paralympics in the past and has done vehicles for differently able drivers. So this is an effort to go after that market as well. Again, no official production confirmation, but I would not be surprised to see it show up sometime in the near future. Let's talk about something really fun, resto mods. If you're not familiar with the term, a resto mod is basically a classic vehicle of some sort that has been fitted with more modern technologies like air conditioning or disc brakes or power steering or Bluetooth audio. Morgan is the 115-year-old boutique sports car maker. Now it is technically the largest independent British automaker, which I know is kind of a low bar, but still kind of cool that they have not been acquired by any larger firm or any large banking firm. They hand build a single car in about 156 hours. That's 20% more time than Bentley needs to build one of those vehicles. So very low volume, very exclusive. And this is sort of a resto mod, sort of not, because it is very much a modern vehicle, even though it looks like something that might have been designed about 70 or 80 years ago. This is the Supersport. It is the new flagship for the Morgan portfolio, replacing the Plus 6, and it does carry over the existing 335 horsepower BMW straight 6 turbo and the 8-speed automatic transmission. And I know 8-speed automatic, not terribly classic, but that's the powertrain that they happen to be stuck with. It does look like the Morgans are already on the road with bug eyes out front and kind of the horseshoe grille, but they do claim a 20% reduction in lift. They don't quote a drag coefficient. I wouldn't either if I had a vehicle looks like this, because it looks very cool, but it does not look very aerodynamic. Underneath is the CXV platform. This is derived from the existing CX bonded aluminum architecture that's underneath the Plus 4. It has added reinforcement that yields about 10% more torsional rigidity and 100% stiffer suspension mounting points. And the idea here is the flagship to make this vehicle a little more civilized. Like all Morgans, however, it still uses an ash frame for the aluminum body. And if you pop the deck lid, which is power operated, you can actually see a little glimpses of the wood that comprises part of the Morgan's structure. The hardtop is a detachable carbon fiber unit. There's also a folding soft top as well. It's got cool 19-inch lightweight wheels. And the interior that you see here retains central mounted gauges with a digital display in front of the driver and Bluetooth connectivity. There's a lot of kind of clever, low-key innovation and engineering that goes into the Morgan. Among them is the speaker boxes for the Sennheiser audio system are actually molded into the chassis. So, this is not something that was just thrown together in somebody's backyard. A lot of thought went into this, and a lot of thought, too, went into trying to maintain the heritage and character of the original Morgans that came out literally 115 years ago. The Supersport starts at about $130,000. It is unfortunately unlikely to make it to the U.S. market. They have arranged to bring a Plus 4 here. If you're really interested in buying a Morgan, that won't be cheap. But if you're ever in Europe and are looking for a fun experience, this looks like a really cool car to play around with on a nice sunny weekend day. And that about wraps things up for this week in the news. Thanks very much for joining me. If you want to learn more about AutoPerspectives, please visit us at www.autoperspectives.net. And if you like what you see, please subscribe and share. We'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.